What everyone's focused on right now is the Senate yesterday passed President Trump's big, beautiful bill.
Yes.
Had to call in the vice president for the tie-breaking vote.
Right.
But he also apparently was able to convince Lisa Murkowski of Alaska to side with the bill, losing a few Republicans there as well. But now it heads to the House.
Yes.
And you've been in politics a long time. We know that in order for this to get done, the House can't change anything to what the Senate gave them.
That whole process has to
gets
restart.
kicked right back.
Right.
We're now hearing that there are some Republicans that are saying that they're no's right now, in some accounts as many as 15 to 20. When you know that members of the House are saying no, most of these big Trump supporters...
Yes.
What do you think ends up happening here?
I think phone calls are starting from the president direct saying, I need you on this. And obviously that number of 20 is not sustainable. So if that number is true, this would be a failure before the votes begin. So I don't think they would even call for a vote if that number is true, which we're going to know very soon because the president and the goal is to get this done before the July 4th holiday so things don't revert back. But the idea, what you said, Will, is they can't ask for more concessions. So that's the difference. This is a pressure campaign now. I heard it this morning just coming into the office here. We're in Tennessee, a couple of members of Congress locally here who have said that they may not vote against it. Those ads are already running, saying call and tell them to vote for President Trump's landmark legislation. I think that's what this is up to, is in the next 24 hours, is President Trump able to convince the American people this is really about his agenda, this is really about what you voted for, and that these Republicans are actually standing in the way of what President Trump won on. And why he won was making these promises like the tax cuts being permanent to the American people. But it's still uphill until you cross over. You saw with J.D. Vance having to come in. That's up until the last moment. If again, Republicans can't get concessions, so they're not going to get more out of this by holding out. The question is, what can they get in the future? What other deals can be made about other legislation? That I don't think we're going to necessarily know. What we will know is if this vote occurs, we will know that it's not up to 20. Now, do you sometimes start these votes and you're still a couple votes short because you want to put the pressure on? Absolutely.
I don't disagree with the frustration, especially what was revealed through Doge, seeing all the waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah, it was criminal at many of these agencies. As a matter of fact, I mean, the HHS and the FDA just unveiled all this criminal fraud that was going on under the eyes of the...
I don't think we've seen yet really the full outcome of what's going to occur with some of those cuts. I think we're just starting to get to the beginning of that, where we're starting to see a little bit less politicized and a little bit more about the actual waste, fraud, and abuse that they found in these agencies and actually getting those cuts made. But I think it's important to know why we are in this situation, the filibuster. So this is a budget reconciliation process, which means you are never going to get to 100%. Now, it's up to you and the American people to decide, does 70% of what you want, is that enough for you? Or would you still vote no? And what would you encourage your member of Congress to do? They'll ultimately have to own this vote. It's very tough to say right now, when you still have the number at 20, that this is definitely going to pass. But in the Senate, we saw this come down to literally the vice president's vote. I would imagine if you look at the history of Mike Johnson as Speaker, he's been able to move these through. Now, the negotiating is, like you said, over. We played a bite during the break that I thought was very telling from Speaker Johnson, and that was, listen, the Senate did their thing. They did a little bit more than we wanted to, but he's not saying we're going to go and change that, because if you do, you're just restarting this process. You're looking at potentially, not funding the government correctly. I think what the White House and now Speaker Johnson needs to do in these 24 hours or less is start explaining to the American people about why they vote yes. Why do you tell your member of Congress who might be one of those 15 holdouts, why do you pick up the phone like the ads are asking you to do? In red states, you're probably hearing these ads right now. Why pick up the phone and do that? And I think now I've been overseas for a month, but I remember this process had started a couple weeks before I left. I was in a meeting with Speaker Johnson when the big, beautiful bill was announced, the name was announced, and they have stuck with that name. But ultimately they knew then, so this is more than 6 weeks ago, how difficult this would be coming up on the July 4th holiday, and now we're here. And so this is a time, I think, where do you go with the president, who many of you support very vigorously, and say, you know what, he's telling you, vote for this, trust me on this, or you're going to go with a member of Congress, may not even be your member of Congress in the House, who potentially just didn't get what they wanted in this. Sometimes there's 435 members of Congress. You've got to convince the Republicans, and maybe some of these Republicans didn't get exactly what they wanted in this piece of legislation. Not to say that's the best way to legislate, is have 200 something odd people put in what they want, then say vote on it. But that is how the reconciliation process works. There's a lot of limitations as well. You saw the parliamentarian strike some of the amendments down. That is just dealing with reality so long as we have a filibuster. If this gets close but doesn't get over the line, it will be seen as a major failure by the Trump administration and by President Trump.
And it also will hurt the American people when their taxes immediately shoot up to pre-2016 levels.
There's a reason why Democrats aren't supporting this.
Yes.
Always remember, when there's 100% Democrat unity against this piece of legislation, anytime there's 100% Democrat unity on a piece of legislation, I'm inclined to support it.
Right.
Like that's where I go on. It's like, if they're that lockstep that they believe this is going to help Republicans, that this is going to help conservatives, why are they so lockstep? Because this will hurt them in their midterm election. So this whole talk by them of, they passed this is going to be, it's horrible for the country, this is going to hurt Republicans so bad, they wouldn't be this lockstep in unity against it. Anytime they are this much in line, and the Democrat Party is not in line on much right now, to me, that tends for me to say, you know what, this is probably better than it is bad. And unfortunately, with legislation, sometimes that's how you have to look at it. Is the better that's in this legislation outweigh the bad that's in there? And that's just part of dealing with reconciliation and dealing with, we don't have a 60-vote majority in the Senate right now to get through the filibuster, the legislative filibuster. What I think has kind of led up to this moment is you've got a group of Republicans thinking this is their moment to outshine President Trump, that they are somehow building a movement that they can take on and take away from him. And so I think we saw that with the decision on Iran, even though so far the negative repercussions from that are null. I mean, I haven't seen any yet. Iran has not been able to respond through proxies. We didn't see Hezbollah enter the conflict. And right now we've got a ceasefire that's holding. So however you want to look at it, Iran's nuclear program has been delayed. I think the second point, though, is who did you vote for? Now, you might have voted for one of these rogue Republicans, and you might have voted for President Trump. What really motivated you to get to the ballot box? And who do you actually trust? So do you trust President Trump saying this is so important to him and his legislative priorities? Or are you going to trust a member of the House that may or may not represent your constituency or you, but is really down to about, out of the Republican majority, you're down to about 20 of them. So it's a pretty small group saying they think this is bad. What motivated you to vote in the last election cycle, and what is going to motivate you to vote in the next election cycle? And likely, if you think back on that, probably wasn't one of these House members. It was probably President Trump.